So I want to talk about some actual controversial opinions I have on music, and I'm going to be focusing more on rock and metal because those are the types I listen to most, but I'm a lot of these statements apply to music in general and do cover other genres too. And I want these to be like actual controversial statements, not like things that like because so many times when people make videos or threads about controversial statements, they say things that actually the vast majority of people will agree with. And it's like, no, this isn't actually a controversial thing to say, but I'm gonna say shit that's actually controversial. Furthermore, I'm not going to be talking so much about specific bands or specific artists, like, oh, this album is better than that album, this artist is better than that artist, because I find that kind of discussion is often just extremely tedious and boring, and it automatically comes down to like, well, that's just your opinion, man. I'm going to be talking more about like broader statements about music and about how I listen to it or how I appreciate it or whatever, or about just like trends in music as a whole, as opposed to like specific artists. So, yeah, without further ado, here are my controversial music related opinions. Okay, the first one is that I don't really care for live music, and whether or not a band is good live ultimately has no bearing on what I think of them. I think I've only been to like four actual concerts in my life. The bands I've seen live were I'm not going to count these like opening bands that nobody's heard of. Okay, so the bands I've seen that people have actually heard of or that I came to see were In Flames and Children of Bodom and Megadeth at Gigantour 2008. And I also saw Alexis on Fire live. I saw Protest the Hero live, and I saw Opeth live. And to be honest, of these live shows, I think the one I enjoyed the most by far was Opeth. But in all cases, I felt that like the music just doesn't sound as good live as it does recorded. I find it's almost impossible unless you have like amazing acoustics or whatever. I just found that the sound wasn't as good live as recorded. And furthermore, I don't know, live concerts, it's just a bit of an exhausting experience. But moreover, okay, the biggest reason is frankly, it's bad for your fucking ears. I'm just gonna be honest. Like, it's very bad. I got like ringing ears for like several days afterward from Gigantour. And like, I don't know. I mean, personally, live concerts aren't my thing. It's just, and because it's not my thing, it's not important to me in terms of how much I appreciate a band. Like some people say, or an artist. Some people will say like, oh, this artist, yeah, sure, they sound great recorded, but live they're terrible. They suck. And I'm like, you know what? That means nothing to me. Like whether or not an artist is good live has absolutely zero bearing on what I think of them because A, I'm not going to go see them live because I'm just not interested in seeing live music. And B, I just don't think it affects the quality of their recorded music. I don't think it somehow like retroactively impacts that. And again, I'm not trying to besmirch live music. Like, hey, some people really love it and more power to them. I'm not going to say that like seeing live music is bad or just as long as you do have some kind of ear protection. I'm not kidding about that shit. And also probably like don't fuck around with like the push pits, the wall of death, all that kind of shit. Like people do actually get injured in those kinds of circumstances. You know, whatever. If you feel you absolutely have to, fine. But I'm just saying I wouldn't recommend it personally. But yeah, my point is, for me personally, live music, I'm not into it. I'm not into seeing bands live. I actually donated money once to Devin Townsend because I was like, hey, I want to give him my money, but I don't want to see any artist live and I don't want to buy physical CDs either. So I just donated money through his website. He was the only musical artist who I found had the option to do that, to just literally just donate money to them. So I did that. Like, frankly, I would rather donate money to an artist to support them rather than see them live. Like, and I mean, I think it's, yeah, like that's just my feeling. Like live music, not for me. The next controversial opinion is I think a band's or artist's quality should be based on the quality and quantity of their best work and not the average of their overall work. So here's an example. Let's say if you have a band that makes 5 great albums and then makes 5 utterly terrible ones, I'd still say they're a great band because you know what? They made 5 great albums, which is way more than most bands can say. Like a perfect example of this would be Metallica. Metallica made 3 of the best metal albums ever made, in my opinion. Ride the Lightning, Master Puppets, and Justice for All. They also made 2 other albums I'd say are solidly good, which is Kill 'Em All and Black Album. I mean, Kill 'Em All I have mixed feelings about. It's more production related in that issue, which is something I'm going to get into in this video too. But my point is, yeah, they made a bunch of really shitty albums afterwards, shitty or just derivative in some cases. But it's like, you know what? Who cares? Metallica is a great band because the fact that they made those 3 great albums is more than like almost any other band can say. And like, I think it's different from like a movie series or TV series because I have an opposite opinion. If it's like something that's like serialized that depends on watching the entire thing to get the full story, then yes, it does affect it if certain items in the series are bad. Like for instance, with Yellow Jackets. Yellow Jackets season 1, in my opinion, might be the best season of any TV show ever made, but the seasons since have been a lot worse, and you can't get the full story of Yellow Jackets without watching the rest of the season. So yes, it does retroactively impact the quality of the entire show. Whereas with music albums, you can listen to one album and you don't have to listen to the next because it's self-contained. It's like music is a different type of medium. It's not a storytelling medium. So it's not like you have to listen to the other albums to get the rest of the story. Like it exists in a self-contained way. The only way that would be, the only exception would be like a concept album, but if there's like a sequel concept album that tells the rest of the story. But even then, do people really listen to concept albums predominantly for like as a storytelling medium or as a sensory medium, which is what music is? Like, I mean, okay, there might be a few bizarre, like there's some random exceptions like Stand by Eminem, but I'm saying by and large, even concept albums or concept songs are still primarily a sensory medium, not a storytelling medium. So my point is, music, like you can make a great album and then a shitty album, but at the same time, it's the great album still exists in a self-contained way. Like you could just listen to that album and not listen to this shit one. Whereas with a movie series, on the other hand, it's like, yeah, you watch Yellow Jackets season 1, but then it's like to get the full story, you have to watch the other seasons too, and the other seasons aren't as good. So it's like, I feel like music is different as a medium in terms of how I would judge the best bands versus the worst. I would judge it not based on the average. I judge it more on the quality and quantity of their best work. So it's like, oh, Metallica made 3 of the best metal albums ever. That makes them one of the best metal bands ever. It doesn't matter that they made a bunch of shit albums afterward because you know what? That legacy, 3 of the most seminal metal albums ever, that puts them among the best metal bands ever. Like that's almost unmatched. Like there's only a few other bands that can claim to have made 3 or more albums of on that level. So that's my opinion. Like it's not about the average, it's about their best material that makes them a great band or a great artist. Next opinion, next controversial opinion, I hate really shitty production values. Just like grimy, shitty, grainy, unless it sounds like deliberately grainy. Okay, I'll explain the difference. Like, okay, the album Mezzanine by Massive Attack, it sounds kind of like deliberately grainy, but not in a shitty way. Whereas a lot of like black metal sounds like grainy, but in a shitty way, as if maybe it was deliberate there too, but it's like, I guess you could say there's like a more polished sounding type of graininess, as oxymoronical as it sounds, versus like a shittier sounding graininess. And like with like a lot of black metal in particular, a lot of it just, the production values, it just sounds like shit, and I can't get into it. Yeah, no, I actually like music to sound more polished. Like, it doesn't have to be like super polished or like overproduced. Like, I do think there's such a thing as being overproduced. But I also think that, like, if I had to go with one extreme or the other, I would favor overproduced over like shitty, absolutely shitty garbage production. Like, to me, it just ruins it. Not just shitty production, but also shitty guitar tones. Like, sometimes when they like make it deliberately make their guitar sound a certain way that just to me sounds like ass, like it ruins certain otherwise good albums. Like, I would say some examples, it's often a lot of bands early work is like this, where either like shitty production values or shitty guitar tones just makes it sound a lot worse. Like, it's like, yes, I do like music to sound a bit polished, especially heavy music. Like, I find with like really heavy music, it's like the heavier it is, the more important it is that it doesn't have like shitty production values. Like, if it gets really, really heavy, it's like it better have good production values to sound good. Like, that's what, like, Lamb of God, that's something I'll say in their favor. Like, a lot of their best albums have really good production quality, and it is very heavy music, and it's like, to me, it's like, for music that heavy, for me to enjoy it, it has to have good production values. And I'd say it's true for all music, but I'd say especially really heavy music. Um like, some examples of albums like that aren't as good because of production values, I'd say Death's earlier albums, like anything before Symbolic, I just can't get into because it just, the production, the guitar tones just to me sounds awful. And it's like, yes, some of it is technically really, really good, but I still can't get into it for that reason. Contrast that to the last two albums that found sound very crisp and clean and just sound a lot better production wise and guitar tone wise. Opeth would be another example of this. Some of their older albums are just so good musically, I do still listen to them, but it's like, production value wise and guitar tone wise, like, a lot of it just sounds bad. Even though, like, musically speaking, it is very good. I'd say like anything before Blackwater Park, I have that issue with, but it gets worse the older it gets. Like, Orchid in particular, ugh. Like, the production of the guitar tones on that just sounds so bad to me. And it gets better with each album. And then I think by Blackwater Park is when it sounds like, it starts sounding like really good in terms of the production and the guitar tones and all that. Another example would be Kazaya, the first LP by Protest the Hero. Otherwise good album, ruined by like just crappy sounding guitar tones. Like, I just don't know why some bands do that. It's like they make the guitars sound a way that just sounds like shit. Like, to me, it sounds just like crap. And it's like, why? And it's sometimes it's clearly not just production, but it's like an active creative decision. Like, we're going to make these guitar tones that just sound really weird and kind of abrasive and kind of just like very, I don't know what's the term for it, like crunchy maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if crunchy is the right word for what I'm going for, but just like really, really awful. Like as I said, some of the albums that are examples, it's like Kazaya by Protest the Hero, any album by Death before Symbolic, and Opeth's albums before Blackwater Park, but I'd say especially before Still Life, like the first three. And again, a lot of these albums, creatively speaking, are quite good, but yet it's just production and guitar tone wise, ugh. Same with, again, like Kill 'Em All by Metallica would be an example. That's more so production rather than guitar tones. Same with like Testament's early albums. Like a lot of early, it's usually for bands, it's usually their early albums that have this problem, as opposed to the later albums. I can't think of any opposite cases where a band actually gets worse in this regard. So I'm not sure if it comes down to like money related or creative decision related, but for whatever reason, a lot of bands, their earlier albums in terms of guitar tones and production quality just do not sound good, and it kind of ruins it for me. Even when creatively speaking, like in terms of the actual songwriting, it can actually be amazing. Like, and in some of these cases, I really wish they would just re-record the albums, or at least re-record the instrumental parts of the albums. because it could sound so much better in some of these cases. Like in Testament's case, they actually did that. They re-recorded a lot of their older stuff, and it sounded way better. Although I'd criticize that because it's like they changed a few things creatively. I really wish it had just been like a straight up like note for note re-recording. I think that would have been better. But yeah. My next controversial opinion, I prefer my music to have vocals. Generally speaking, I'm not the hugest fan of instrumental music, although some of it can be very good, but especially with rock and metal. Like I find rock and metal are just genres that lend themselves better to vocals. Like I don't think guitar-based music should really be instrumental as a rule. Like even when there's a really good rock or metal instrumental track, I listen to it and I think, how much even better could this have sounded with vocals? Like, and sometimes when a band will have like some of their best material as an instrumental, I'll think like, what a waste. Like, you went to all this effort and you didn't put vocals on it. Like, it could have been even better. Like, I'll make that criticism about like, for instance, the title track "Ashes of the Wake" by Lamb of God, or like that was like some of their best instrumental work, and it's like you didn't put vocals on that. Why? Like obviously, yeah, there's like the spoken word vocals, but there wasn't, which was like some soldier from like some clip talking about the Iraq War, but there wasn't like Randy Blythe doing his thing, and it's like, how awesome would that have been? Side note, he's one of the best harsh vocalists in existence. Amazing, amazing vocals. But yeah, also like another example would be some tracks on The Mantle by Agalloch. That's one of my favorite albums of all time. But yet some of these instrumentals, I'm thinking like, this is so good. Could they not have like found a way to like add vocals to it? Like, yeah. I'd say like generally speaking, like rock or metal without vocals, like instrumentals that I think actually work better as instrumentals, are extreme exceptions and not the rule. Like I'd say maybe a few tracks off Agalloch's The White EP might be examples of that, but by and large, no. Like, and even in the case of genres that lend themselves better to instrumentals, like say classical music or electronic music, even in those cases, I would say my favorite songs or tracks overwhelmingly are ones with vocals. I'd say like the one case, maybe the one big exception would be like film soundtrack music. A lot of that I'll listen to, be like, okay, yes, this is better as an instrumental, like film score music, like by Hans Zimmer or Ludwig Göransson, or like any kind of like, yeah, film soundtrack. Like that would be the exception where I'm like, okay, that kind of music does sound better as instrumentals. But like even with classical music, a lot of my favorites are with vocals, like say Ode to Joy or what's it called? Nessun Dorma. That one, even if you don't know what I'm talking about, you'll know it if you hear it. It's in a bunch of movies. It's like that really, really epic song. Usually in like a scene where like a bunch of people are getting killed or something like that. Like I feel like there's like multiple movies that have used it in that context, with like a bunch of people like getting assassinated at once or something like that, with that particular track, Nessun Dorma. But yeah, I just prefer my music with vocals as a general rule. I guess film soundtrack music would be like the one exception. Okay, next controversial opinion. Most, but not all, rock and metal music is better off with guitar solos. And the war on the guitar solo was one of the worst things about the 90s and 2000s, which were otherwise great decades for rock and metal music. Yeah, I like guitar solos. You can't convince me that like trying to eliminate guitar solos from rock and metal was a good decision. Because it's like, I'm sorry, I listen to a lot of like new metal and other related genres, and I listen to it and I think this song could have used a guitar solo. Like I think this for a lot of songs. And like in particular, when you look at like Disturbed, for instance, like they started adding guitar solos in 10,000 Fists, and it's like, okay, it was clearly an improvement, and they were clearly holding back before, because the guitar solos are actually pretty good. And it's like same with Slipknot. Like And it feels like I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard there was even like executive meddling there where some of these bands were like pressured or like forced to not incorporate guitar solos when they wanted to. And it's like, this is just a stupid creative decision. And in some cases, you could tell that they were really holding back because it's like, I think around like 2005, there was like this sea change. Like basically what happened is I think like around 1995, 94, Korn came into the scene, and Korn is a very like we don't do solos kind of band. I feel like in their case, they didn't even want to do solos. It just wasn't their thing. And it kind of became the norm, not just in nu metal, but in like other genres of rock and metal music, like mostly between 1995 and 2005. And even in some bands you listen to, like for instance, Mastodon. If you listen to their album Leviathan, which came out in that era, surprisingly, I went back and listened to it. Surprisingly, there's not that many solos in it, and you'd think there would be because Mastodon has a lot of guitar solos in their later work, and they're a pretty technical band. Like they're very proggy, but no, there's not many solos in that album in like their earlier stuff. And I think it's because during that era, guitar solos were not in vogue. Same with Lamb of God. Like not a ton of solos. There's some, but there aren't that many, and they're kind of short. So yeah, that era, otherwise a great era for rock and metal, but the war on the guitar solo, just like the war on terror at the time, maybe ill-advised, you know? A lot of aspects of it ill-advised. And around 2005, I think guitar solos started to come back in vogue, which was why you saw a lot of bands suddenly incorporating more of them around that time. Like Disturbed and Slipknot kind of both took the handcuffs off their guitarists and said, okay, you can do solos now. And they're actually pretty good in many cases. Like Disturbed especially, surprisingly, like, okay, like I think Disturbed is a fairly mid band overall, but they actually do have some very good guitar solos. And even I'd say David Draymond's actually a pretty good vocalist. It's just that he makes some bad creative choices. But I think they're a band that I think they're talented in terms of their raw ability, but yet some of their creative choices, like they've chosen to sound kind of mid in a lot of ways. I'd say Coldplay in some ways is a bit like that too. Although Coldplay, I think at their best was genuinely pretty good. Like they actually had some genuinely great material. But yeah, my point is, okay, I'm digressing a lot here. I think guitar solos are a good thing in rock and metal music mostly. Like I'm not saying every song, every album, every artist should be full of guitar solos, but I'm saying there's more than not cases of like solos being pushed out of certain albums, certain bands that I think should have incorporated them and would have been better for it. And we saw it when they started re-embracing it around 2005. Like you had like Slipknot, Disturbed, Mastodon, various bands starting to like embrace guitar solos more. And I think they were better off for it at that point. Like when I go back and listen to like Slipknot or Disturbed's early work, I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of these songs that I think could have used a good guitar solo. Same with Mudvayne. They actually, in their first two albums, they go to show it is possible to be very technical without guitar solos, but I can't help but wonder, would it have been even better with guitar solos also? Still, like their first album is absolutely amazing, but nonetheless, I can't help but wonder. Same with like Nothing Face. Like they have some good material. They do have some guitar solos, but I can't help but wonder, would it be better with more of them? Like that style of music, I think, does lend itself well to guitar solos. And same with certain other bands that just don't do them at all. Like say like Chevelle, for instance. I don't think they have guitar solos at all. And I think they'd work in the context of a band like Chevelle. But yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to say every band should have guitar. Like I think there are some bands that genuinely work without them. Like, let's say like, okay, like Radiohead, for instance, like they have some guitar solos. They even have some that are quite long, but I'm saying a lot of their material doesn't need or warrant guitar solos because it's just kind of completely just different in the style of music it's going for. Whereas if you're going for something that's like straight up like, taking names and kicking ass, like hard rock, heavy metal, in that case, I'd say yes, guitar solos are warranted because they're just a staple of that kind of music. It doesn't mean literally every song has to have one, but I'm saying, like, I think trying to push guitar solos out of rock and metal music during that era was a bad idea. And I think there's a lot of stuff from them that would have been even better if it had had guitar solos. Okay, another controversial opinion: harsh vocals are overused in metal these days. They have their place. I'm not anti harsh vocals. A lot of my favorite bands have harsh vocals, but they're overused, and there just aren't enough metal bands these days with clean vocals. And I think that's partly why, like, look at Ghost. Like, they're a band that, like, objectively, they're not like amazing or anything, but I think there's so few like hard rock or heavy metal type bands these days with clean vocals that, like, people saw one band, like relatively new one in the 2010s, come along with clean vocals, and people saw them as like a breath of fresh air, because it's just, there just aren't enough these days. Like, metal these days is just oversaturated with harsh vocals and just not enough clean vocals. And even some bands, like there's some bands that have either harsh vocals entirely or a mix of harsh and clean vocals. And I'm like, I think frankly, in some cases, they might work better without the harsh vocals, or at least if they tried it. Like, I understand that, like, some bands have tried eliminating the harsh vocals and with mixed results. Like, say Opeth tried it, it didn't go so well. But it's also because Opeth changed their core sound. It wasn't just because of eliminating the harsh vocals. Whereas Mastodon, for instance, they changed their sound to, like, not eliminate the harsh vocals, but like extremely like downplay them compared to before. And I'd argue that, like, a lot of Mastodon's better work has been since they did that. Like, Crack the Sky in particular is my favorite Mastodon album. An amazing, amazing album. I'm going to be honest, I'm not the hugest fan of Mastodon's vocals, period, like harsh or clean vocals. I think their vocals aren't terrible, but they're not the selling point of the band. But, like, nonetheless, I will say Crack the Sky is an absolutely phenomenal album. Very atmospheric. Very atmospheric. To me, it evokes images of kind of like the Appalachian Mountains in the fall. I actually did drive through Shenandoah National Park listening to Crack the Sky in the fall. So yeah, it definitely, it worked for that. Like, this very southern forest kind of vibe, like Great Smoky Mountains or Appalachians or whatever. That's to me the vibe I get from Mastodon, especially like that album. And they're from Atlanta, so it makes sense. Bunch of old southern white boys. What the fuck was I talking about? ADHD moment. Like, I digress a lot. I need to, like, keep a leash on that, seriously. But yeah, I think, yeah, harsh vocals. Yeah, sorry, that's what I was talking about. I just think there's not enough bands with clean vocals, and I listen to some bands with harsh vocals, and I question. Like, I was listening for the first time the other day to a song by this band called Bolt Thrower, and it had, like, I forget the name of the song. It was their top rated song on Rate Your Music. It had, like, this really awesome guitar riff, but then I hear the vocals come in, and I think, like, this would have been better with clean vocals, like with something more akin to, like, Metallica or Slayer, or, like, I don't know, like, just something like of that nature, like kind of like thrash style vocals or whatever. Like, it to me, it's like it had this like really like kind of like heavy guitar riff, but like the type of heaviness that would be more suited for that sort of vocals as opposed to like harsh vocals. And I get the like this kind of like almost like really heavy like rock and roll type riff. And I'm thinking, like, yeah, in this day and age, like, I think in metal, I think metal has become almost deliberately niche. And I think part of that is the emphasis on harsh vocals. And I think I understand the concern about like metal becoming too mainstream if there's too much clean vocals, but the problem is there's just not enough clean vocals in metal, and like that type of music has become all too rare these days. And especially considering that like a lot of the metal bands with clean vocals that are still around, still popular, are legacy acts that are like 30 or 40 or more years old in terms of like how long the band has been around. In terms of the ages of the band members, often significantly higher than that. Well, no shit. Nobody starts making music when they're a baby, but except baby metal, obviously. But yeah, like some bands, like for instance, I can't help but wonder, like with like Neobliviscaris, for instance, like if it was just clean vocals, would it be potentially better that way? Maybe. They're a really good band, but I do wonder it sometimes, like are the harsh vocals always warranted? Would it be better if they had some albums or at least some songs that were just clean vocals? Like I think they could make it work, for instance. Um Same with Between the Buried and Me, although again, they kind of, the problem is like with Opeth is like they sort of had the same trajectory where I think they didn't eliminate the harsh vocals. I think they're still mostly harsh vocals, but I think they went in a direction of having a bit more clean vocals, but it was unfortunately around the same time that the band had maybe reached their creative peak. So they're sort of on the downfall at that point. So it's like in some ways I regret that some of these bands hadn't tried it earlier, because in some cases it's like, yeah, their harsh stuff and their clean stuff is both good, but I feel like in some cases they could have let the clean vocals stand on their own a bit more. It's the same with like Neobliviscaris. Like sometimes there's songs where it's like you'll have like a mix of harsh and cleans in the same section. And sometimes I'll think like, okay, these clean vocals would have been better just on their own without the harsh vocals. Like there was a few songs that were like that in their most recent album, Exol. Like they had several songs that had sections like that where it's like, I really wish they just let the clean vocals stand on their own a bit more. And yeah, in their case, Neobliviscaris, could they work as a band with just clean vocals? I think maybe, yeah, they could. So yeah, I'm just gonna say, like, I think I'm not saying I dislike harsh vocals. I'm not one of those people, but I think maybe there could be more bands with clean vocals these days. Like I think there's just not enough of it. Okay, the next is something I've talked about before. I think metal needs to expand outside of metal. What does that mean? What I mean is, I think one of the unexplored frontiers in music is music that is not guitar based, like not strictly speaking metal, but has the spirit of metal. Basically, like I think either like electronic or classical music, or even music that combines electronic and classical elements, but is not strictly speaking metal in the sense that it's not guitar based music, but rather music that's either electronically based or orchestrally based, or maybe a combination of both. But that just sounds like metal in terms of like the way it sounds. And I think with vocals also, but like I think a lot of dark synth music has been going in this direction, but the problem is it's almost entirely like instrumental. And we really need like that kind of music, but with like metal style vocals, both like metal style harsh and clean vocals. Same with classical, like purely orchestral music. Like you could have like a lot of like stuff that's kind of like Holst or Wagner or something like that, like heavy classical, but with like actual like metal style vocals. Like you could have like operatic vocals too, but it's like, yeah, why not have something like thunderous, like orchestral music? And I'm not talking like symphonic metal. I'm talking like purely orchestral music. Like no electric guitars at all. But like purely orchestral music with like metal style vocals, whether it be like, you know, like Judas Priest style clean vocals, like power metal or Judas Priest or Iron Maiden or what have you, like that type of vocals, like more like operatic, but kind of like metal style operatic. Or hell yeah, you could even have like classical orchestral music with harsh vocals. Why not? You know, I think a lot of this stuff, it hasn't really been tried yet. And I think it could be potentially awesome. I think this sort of thing could be the new frontier in heavy music. And I think people really need to be willing to experiment with this sort of thing more. Um, the next is that I think elitism and gatekeeping can be a good thing in music. It's okay to look down on certain artists or even entire genres as being crappy, uncreative, overrated, bland, or just kind of like boring, conformist, normie music, whatever. Like, it's okay to hold these opinions, and in many cases, it's true. Like, Taylor Swift does sound like a product. Like, when I listen to her music, it just sounds like a product. It's like the McDonald's of music. It's like, it's a product. It's very phoned in. It's very derivative. It's just, it doesn't sound interesting on a musical level. And there's a lot of music like this. I'm not saying all pop music is like this. There's some pop music that's very creative, but I'm saying stuff like Taylor Swift, like, it deserves that reputation, and her fan base deserves that reputation also. I'm not just talking about Taylor Swift. I'm talking about like that entire style of music, like whatever, like Bruno Mars or what have you. Like that, like a lot of this like uncreative, bland, top 40 pop music. And a lot of rap too could fall into this as well. Like, I do think musical snobbery has its place and is valid and is often a good thing. The only case where it's not a good thing is when too much gatekeeping prevents artists from experimenting. Like, for instance, in the aforementioned case of how, like, I think um, metal style music needs to branch out more into like orchestral or like electronic music, like classical or electronic. I could see some metal gatekeepers really disliking that, but I think that's a different type of gatekeeping, because on one hand, you have like gatekeeping where they're trying to stop stuff from sounding just totally derivative and boring and like basically like a product. On the other hand, you have gatekeeping where it's like people want to stop certain types of experimentation because it's too different from what they're used to. And I think the first type of gatekeeping is worse than the second, because I think with music, like, being liberal in music can be a good thing. Being progressive in music can be a good thing. Like, I like progressive rock, progressive metal. Um, I mean, it's not the same as like modernist architecture where it's like we're going to just make shit and we're going to call it progressive and we're going to make it the only type of thing you can make. In the case of music, it's like experimentation is often a good thing. But at the same time, I think gatekeeping against like becoming derivative, just gatekeeping against like derivative garbage, derivative slop is also a good thing. And I think in many cases, counter elitism is more annoying than elitism. Like, counter elitism has become the new elitism, where it's like you can't say anything bad about like popular music without getting labeled as a contrarian or an edge lord or a gatekeeper or whatever. And it's this whole poptimism mentality. It's become very tiresome that you can't make these legitimate criticisms without being labeled as a pathological contrarian. It's like, yes, there are people out there who genuinely are pathological contrarians. Like people who will utterly insist, oh, Lulu was the best album that Metallica ever made. Like, that's actual pathological contrarianism. Saying that you think Taylor Swift is mediocre, bland, lowest common denominator slop, that's not contrarianism. That's just that's just the truth, frankly. That's just speaking the truth. And I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this attitude, and I see it all the time in music related groups, like on social media, on Reddit, on whatever, like in all kinds of like music related like forums and groups and stuff. Like, I see this attitude a lot where it's like you can't criticize popular stuff without being labeled a contrarian. And I'd actually say there's more of that than the opposite. There's way more of this counter elitism, counter gatekeeping than there is actual elitism and gatekeeping. It's a bit like with the reaction to the Starbucks coffee. Like, remember when Starbucks had that Christmas cup and there was that fake controversy about it? Like, when it was just like this red cup for Christmas, and they were saying, oh, the religious right is upset about this, but they actually weren't. And it was entirely like liberals reacting to it rather than the people actually getting upset about it in the first place. Like the counter reaction was a million times bigger than the actual reaction, which was largely made up. And it's the same here. It's like, I'd argue like counter elitism and counter gatekeeping at this point in musical discussion are a far bigger force and frankly far more annoying than like actual elitism and actual gatekeeping. Like there's way more people reacting to it than who are actually doing it. And it's often just a conversation stopper. It's a thought terminating cliche. Like, oh, you're being an elitist, you're being a gatekeeper, you're a contrarian, blah 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 blah. Shut up. No. I don't like Taylor Swift. Fuck you. You can call me these things as many times as you want. It's not going to make me like Taylor Swift or Sabrina Carpenter or all their millions of derivative clones. It's not going to make me like Soulja Boy or T-Pain or whatever the hell fucking rap music, like shit tier rap music clones of theirs or whatever. And again, I'm not trying to say all pop is shit or all rap is shit or whatever. I am just saying that these particular genres do contain a lot of this like lowest common denominator style music. And frankly, yes, even within rock and metal, like if people want to criticize, like I like nu metal, but I will agree that some of it is kind of lowest common denominator. Some of it's like a bit of a guilty pleasure for me, but there's still the guilty element, and you should feel a bit guilty about it because some of it is kind of derivative and mediocre. That being said, not all of it. Like I think there's some nu metal that's like genuinely good music, like Deftones, System of a Down, and Mudvayne's first two albums. And like Nothing Face, Carnival's first album, I guess you could kind of consider nu metal. It sounds pretty nu metal-ish, but they really go beyond that later on. But yeah, my point is, if people want to gatekeep about nu metal as a whole and say like, yes, there's some good nu metal out there, but as a whole, nu metal's not great, and it kind of dragged down metal and was a bad influence on metal with like the war on the guitar solo and stuff like that, which did bleed into like actual metal also. It's like, okay, that's a legitimate criticism, and even though I like a lot of nu metal, I will agree like it did have some negative influence on metal as a whole by dumbing certain things down for the masses and, you know, trying to get rid of guitar solos and stuff like that, trying to make metal a bit more derivative. It's like some of this music works. Like I'm not gonna lie, like I do like some of the hit songs like by like Limp Bizkit or Linkin Park or Disturbed or Korn or what have you. Like I do like a lot of this music, but I will agree with the criticism that some of it did bleed into actual metal and did dumb it down a bit, and that was a problem. Like it wasn't like this like big wall between the two. It's like, okay, we have nu metal, we have actual metal, and ne'er the twain shall meet. It's like, no, actually some issues from nu metal did bleed into actual metal from nu metal, and it was a problem that like, yeah, guitar solos were being shut out of the picture even by actual metal bands, and there probably was some industry pressure at the time to do so. So it's like, yeah, gatekeeping is valid. I'm not gonna dismiss gatekeeping. Okay, the final opinion, and this is probably the least controversial one, most people will probably agree with this. Whether a band or artist is part of a particular genre isn't as important as whether or not they're good. So debating like, you know, is Alice in Chains metal? Can grunge be metal? Can nu metal be actual metal? Is Deftones actual metal? Is Tool actual metal? Blah, blah. Like, is a band rock or metal? Or is it like a certain type of metal, certain type of rock, whatever? Ultimately, whether a band or artist conforms to a specific genre, it's part of a specific genre, isn't as important as whether or not it's good. Like the question, you know, is Alice in Chains metal isn't as important as the question, is Alice in Chains a good band? And I'd say definitely yes. Most people would probably agree with this one. I don't think it's a terribly controversial opinion. Which is why I put it at the end of the video, because I don't think it's that controversial, but yeah, it's just a take. So yeah, I guess those are, yeah, that's my opinion on, yeah, controversial takes on music.